Good morning, Patrick County. Welcome to another program of the people, the places, and the performers of Patrick County. Tourism is dedicated to promoting the county through print, video, and various products to showcase the beauty here. Patrick County is an excellent place to visit, live, love, and enjoy. We have everything here from primitive camping to five-star luxury, our history, outdoor tranquility, hiking, biking, and the beauty of the Blue Ridge Mountains makes this a destination worth seeing. So come, get lost, and find yourself here. We're very happy today to have one of our very own with us here, Patrick County native, one that has done a lot for the county, Mr. Tom Perry, author and extraordinaire. How you doing today, Mr.
I'm
Perry?
good, James.
Good,
They
good,
call
good,
me
good.
Mr. Perry.
Oh.
Mr. Perry was my father.
Okay, all right, Tom. Yeah, we're looking forward to getting you here. So I guess those that don't know you, before we do begin, this is only a small remnant of the books that Mr. Perry Tom has written here in the county. But I'm going to let him introduce himself, and then we'll start having some conversations with him and about his work.
All right. Well, thank you, James. Pleasure to be with y'all today. I grew up in Patrick County in Ararat. My dad was principal at Blue Ridge and Red Bank. Some of us still remember Red Bank as a school in Claude. He was there. He was in the county for about 30 years. My mother worked at Dr. Tullidge's office in Claudeville, and then she went to work for Quality Meals for about 40 years. But I grew up at Ararat as the principal's son. I don't wish that on anybody.
I understand.
Because he knew about it before I got home if I ever got in trouble.
Yeah.
I graduated Patrick County High School in '79 and Virginia Tech in '83. And in the late '80s, I started thinking about JEB Stuart's birthplace because I had grown up with Shug and Icy Brown, who always wanted to see something done to preserve the place.
Mm-hmm.
In the late '80s, we started a group that now the JEB Stuart Birthplace Trust, which now owns 75 acres of that. And when I started that, my idea was I was thinking, well, we'll turn this into sort of an outdoor classroom because that place has Native American, indigenous people. It has obviously African Americans. There were at least 30 slaves there at one point.
Mm-hmm.
There was a Rev War. JEB Stuart's great grandfather was killed there on the property during the American Revolution. So we had just this timeline of Patrick County and its history at that site. And that's kind of what I started out wanting it to be. Of course, now it's kind of turned into Civil War. But if you go out there and walk around, there's interpretive signs that tell all that history.
Oh, that's good.
And that's what I really originally wanted it to be.
Okay.
And I think it is.
Yeah. So is that what drawn you into writing books for the county? Because I know you have so many different perspectives and stories on the county, but is that what got you started?
Well, my mother got me started. My mother was just a prolific reader. She read a book a day and not even blink. Mm-hmm. And she found out I was interested in that property. And one of the things she did was she took me down and left me with Mr. and Mrs. Brown when I was a little fella. And she didn't realize what a monster she was creating by doing it. But Mr. and Mrs. Brown, Shug, his name, George Elbert Shug Brown, owned that place. And he would walk you around and give you the tour and tell you everything he knew about it because his family had owned it for almost 100 years. Mm-hmm. And Icy, his wife, Icy Bowman Brown, she made scrapbooks. And she kept scrapbooks about the JEB Stuart birthplace. And recently, I worked with Amy Snyder at the museum in Mount Airy. We just went through Icy's scrapbooks and digitized them, scanned them all, because a lot of the things I know about Stuart's birthplace, I only know because of Icy, because she kept those scrapbooks. And so we've digitized those recently, and that was what really got me going was my mother and her books. And the first book I ever did, 20 plus years ago now, was about JEB Stuart doing his genealogy because we had so many people asking me if they were related to him. Mm-hmm. And I got tired of that, so I gave them a book so we could raise money for the birthplace. Yeah.
That's all right.
And that's what we did. But my mother's the one who really got me interested in books. I was fascinated with history from a very young age. I don't know what you got for Christmas, but I got books.
Well, that's good. Yeah.
I got books for Christmas, and I love that. She started me off 7, 8 years old. I get books for Christmas, which most people probably would think that's not
Not a good
But I
list was
loved it.
good.
I loved it. And that's how I got started.
Okay.
Was her.
Well, how many books do you think you've read? I mean, not read, but how many books do you think you've actually written? Because I know I went
get
to your
that.
site, and it's an immense amount of books.
Well, I've written a lot of books. Almost all of them are nonfiction,
Yeah.
and they're most, I'd say, a majority of them are Patrick County history in some way or form. But I don't really know, to tell you the truth. I've never really counted them. I've published a lot of books for people too. But I started off writing about JEB Stuart, and then I wrote a book about Patrick County and the Civil War, which is probably my best book that I'll ever write. And but I've morphed into things where we've done books on the Dinky Railroad, which ran from Mount Airy up to Kibler Valley. We've done books about Andy Griffith.
Yeah, I've seen that
We've
one.
done all kinds of things. And of course, Andy's mother was from Patrick County, something people don't realize. She grew up over there near Kibler Valley, what we call Meadowfield, and she grew up there. So Andy, one of my things, James, is I tell people, if you know somebody who's an elderly, an older person, go and talk to them.
Yeah.
And take your phone, your recorder, and record them. And I promise you, you'll never regret doing that, because I have learned lots and lots of things over the course of my life from just sitting down and talking to the oldest person in the community I could find. One guy, talking about Andy Griffith, is when I was at high school, Jim Love was over the ROTC over here at Patrick County High
I remember
School.
Mr. Love.
And we were all scared to death of Jim Love. Let me tell you, he'd been in Vietnam. He's in the Air Force.
Yeah.
He was a tough dude.
Yes, he
But
was.
after I got out of school, I developed a friendship with him. Well, he lived over near Kibler and grew up with his brothers and everything. And he knew all about the railroad. And he used to take Andy Griffith around and show him where his mother's people were buried and where they lived and things like that. So Jim, you sit down and have lunch with Jim, and you'd be hearing about Andy Griffith all afternoon or the railroad. So I tell people, find the oldest person you know and sit down and talk to them and record it, because you'll never regret it.
Yeah. You know, that's one of the things too, especially with the county itself, you know, and I consider myself still to be sort of young, but anyway, that being said, but the diversity of the history that we have here, and a lot of times we don't, and I've skimmed through several of your books that we've had here, that you had given the visitor center a few years back, and just the scope of information, from everything from music to heritage to places to people. And it fits right in with the title of the segment here, the people and the places and the performers of Patrick. Do you have one book that, I know you mentioned your first book or your best book, but do you have one book that you might say is your absolute favorite?
My favorite book probably is one about JEB Stuart called The Dear Old Hills of Patrick, and it's all about his family from the time they get to North America up through today. And the last chapter is about what we did to try to preserve the birthplace. That's probably my favorite book. I go back and revise it every once in a while, but that's the one I like. That's dedicated to my mother, so it's all her fault.
Oh, okay.
And so I like that book. Probably the one that sells the best, of course, is Andy Griffith. You put Andy Griffith on the cover of a blank book, you could sell it. So that's my bestseller. But some of them I do for fun. Some of them I do just for think we need to do it for some reason. Patrick County's history is just remarkable. I mean, I grew up in Ararat, and in Ararat you had Bob Childers, the man who moved the mountain. He lived most of his life there.
Yeah.
He was a blacksmith before he became the man who moved the mountain. We had Anne Arlene Puckett, who was the midwife, on the Parkway.
Yes.
She and her husband lived not too far from Grace's mama's house. And her children, she had like 20 children of her own, and none of them survived. And she was part of the midwife to 1,000, including Bob Childers. So, we got people like that. We got R.J. Reynolds, JEB Stuart. We have, just a plethora of people who come from this county or have connections to this county. That it's just unbelievable, really. We used to have 2 covered bridges. Now we're down to 1. And that was, I've written a book about that. Again, I went to a lady at Woolwine who was Betty Perry, who was the same name as my mother, but not my mother. And she gave me all the information on her grandfather, who was Walter Weaver, who built all the covered bridges. So we did books about them. And just little things. Clarence Hall, I did a book with my friend Clarence Hall. Clarence was auto mechanics teacher at Patrick County when I was there. And he spent most of his adult life trying to memorialize the men who died on Bull Mountain in World War II. And he got a marker put up here at the courthouse and up on top of the mountain. And that was 1944. And as a little boy, he had seen the fire up on the mountain.
Oh, okay.
So Clarence, who was a great banjo player, and he spent his whole life kind of devoting it to memorializing those men who died that day.
Okay.
And so we got all kinds of history like that. Just one of my favorite stories is about Meadows-a-Dan. There was this fellow named Notley Price Adams, and the joke was he got in front of the judge up here and said, "Judge says, state your name," and he said, "Not Adams." And the judge says, "Well, who are you then?" So I've written a book about him. He was accused of burning down Jefferson Lawson's house, who lived up there in Meadows-a-Dan. And he had 4 court cases, ended up going all the way to the governor of Virginia, who pardoned him for this. And he died after the Civil War. And I love this in the order books up here. He said he died of a deranged mind.
Oh,
that was
man.
what they said he
Yeah.
died. But he was a very litigious person.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd kept the lawyers up down Main Street here very busy, I expect. But he was not Adams.
Not Adams.
He was not Adams.
That's all right. Yeah, and that's one of the things I just want to encourage you to, Patrick, is just that when you're starting to do some stuff on history, and we're getting more and more involved in the history. We've got the VA 250 committee that we tried to start, in which we have been, and we've got some local input so far on it. And we'll be reaching out again also to Tom here about getting some more information on the Revolutionary War, or at least the efforts that happened in this particular community, and knowing that we wasn't actually established as a county or the town of Stuart as of yet either. But there's so much history that Tom has wrote about that. Go to your website, and there you'll find things there too, and just pick out one of his books and read them. And they got a lot of books with pictures too.
Yeah, well, we all need pictures. Reading books is a job. Pictures are a lot more fun. But I was very lucky. When I was younger, Bobby Clement over in Ararat and Carrie Sue Culler over in Ararat shared their photos with me.
Mm-hmm.
And I've scanned them in and digitized them, and we've put those in lots and lots of books. Again, going back to this thing, find the oldest person you know and just go talk to them.
Yeah.
And Bobby and Carrie Sue and Bertie Gwynn over there let me have their pictures to scan them, and I've just got thousands of things like that. Carrie Sue lived to be 107 years old, and I think anytime there was a camera around, she managed to get her picture made. She was the queen of the selfie before there was such a thing as a selfie. I can't tell you how many pictures I have of her, from a little baby to 100-year-old.
That's all right. That's good. That's good. And that's what we love, is just to keep the history, to keep the things relevant. And to Tom's point, yeah, if you can document it, because I know the Historical Society a few years back had went around, several of them that tried to record the oral history of the county. And there are a lot of things that's up there at the library is now too. And we've got a lot of historical books that's written about them. And, if anyone's out there again that's looking to discover their family legacy, their history here, good place to start is some of the stuff that's already written. But you can take some of your guides, especially when you're dealing with them, and use that as a jumping off point for their own families. And that's what we're trying to do now, especially when it comes to the Revolutionary War, since we are going into 2026, which is going to be the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution. And we want it to be a celebration and commemorance, but also celebration in the sense to be very thankful for what we've got. And again, I know we had talked before coming on camera that you were looking into some of the history is there too.
Yeah, one of the things I was talking about with the birthplace, the birthplace is just not about JEB Stuart. It's about his great-grandfather who was killed there during the Revolution. And it was Henry County then. Mm-hmm. It wasn't Patrick yet. And he's buried in the oldest marked grave in the county. A lot of us who are my age and younger, we had a fellow named O.E. Pilson. Ophus Eugene, and he was kind of our local historian. He wrote a good bit of the history of Patrick County, the big gold book that the Historic Society sells. And Mr. Pilson mentored a lot of us, me and Ronnie Haynes and Desmond Kendrick. We all would get in Mr. Pilson's big blue Chevelle, and he'd ride us around and tell us all this stuff. He wasn't a hoarder; he shared it. And one of his favorite things was the William Letcher story, where he got killed during the Revolution over there at the birthplace. You're talking about the oral history. The top book there is about the oral history project. In the late 70s, they went around and interviewed, 120 people in Patrick County and recorded them. And the tapes are at the library here and at Virginia Tech. I've been trying for years to get Virginia Tech to digitize those.
Yeah.
But you'll find people, everybody from Phil Clark to Russell Inscore, who ran a store over there in Ararat, to Carrie Sue, people who are long gone now, but they recorded them.
Yeah.
And there's some great stuff on some of those tapes. So oral history is alive and well in Patrick County. We probably ought to go around and do that again. But they did about 120 people.
Yeah.
And the tapes are at the library.
Yeah, I was very fortunate because I knew my grandfather. He actually worked at Clark Brothers, Junior Houchins down there for years. And he was one of the prominent, African-American citizens in the county as well, too. And they had him on recordings and he talked about seeing the development of the county and all of the things we went through, and had a conversation with a young man, yesterday, and was just talking about, the relationships here in the county, the diversity of them. But it was to be a Southern community, it was a outstanding place for us to grow up. I mean, we really didn't have too many major issues, but to keep that history going and really to show how diverse we were, because again, the indigenes, the Indians, the African Americans that was here as well too, and then all the prolific other people that come through the county. It's amazing that we have such a rich history here.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of times people shy away from controversy and things. I think we need to talk about it.
Yeah.
I think we need to talk about the African-American experience in Patrick County and slavery instead of pretending it didn't happen or hiding from it. Or, we just need to come right out and talk about it. And I think that's, I know at the birthplace, you go to JEB Stuart's birthplace, you don't think you're going to run into interpretive signs about slavery, but you are.
Yeah.
You are going to run. And I talk about it quite a bit. In my books, I talk about it just to show you how things work out. We're really lucky in this county because we've never had a fire at the courthouse.
Yeah.
Everything that's ever been in the courthouse is either here or at the Library of Virginia. And one of the things that I discovered in my research was JEB Stuart's father, Archibald, was the Commonwealth attorney for this county. He was a lawyer, but he was a horrible businessman. And anytime he got in debt, one of the things he would do, they viewed slaves as property.
Yeah.
So he would put his slaves up as collateral. Well, because he did that in the order books up here, every one of his slaves are named. Otherwise, we'd have no idea what their names were, except maybe in the 1850 census where they're named. But because Archibald was so terrible as a businessman and got in debt and had all these loans and things, he had to name them all. And so I know the names of almost every slave that was there, which is not easy to find. That's hard to do. But Patrick County, we've never had a lot of racial strife compared to other people. Patrick County's always been kind of more moderate in its viewpoint. Not to being black or being a slave in Patrick County was
I understand it.
We, believe it or not, during the Civil War, we had about 150, 200 free people living in this county. And, that wasn't easy because you were always being looked at like you were going to cause trouble and things like that. You had to go to the courthouse and register every year and pay money to get a piece of paper that said you were a free man. Otherwise, they could put you in slavery. And so, that's not unusual for Virginia. Every county in Virginia is like that. But, Patrick County, all that's still up there. And you can go and research it if you have the patience to read order books, which some of us don't have a life and can do that, I guess. But it's a lot of work. But it's just amazing what's up there that I think even we don't know about yet.
And I know I've got several family members that we've talked about trying to, document our history and a lot of things that's been on and into the county. And I know Reynolds Homestead's got a program that they're going to be coming up, I think next week too. Professor from Clemson University she's affiliated with, where they talk about call my name. So it's good that the history, and I didn't know that. And I mean, and that's another thing too. And I just encourage anyone who's trying to maybe find out some of their past history or how their family came to be here, whether it was through moving here or through slavery or whatever, start there. And I mean, we could probably get some good history of, who we are, where we come from. But again, it's just outstanding that the relationship, and you having that opportunity again to continue to document some of them. And that's awesome. I mean, you don't get any better than that. What type of process do you do when you get ready to start writing books? I mean,
Well, it depends on what the book is. If it's, I've been I used to spend a lot of time in the Library of Virginia in Richmond, at UVA, at Tech. I hate to say it out loud, but North Carolina and Duke both have very good libraries. There's a lot of Patrick County history, believe it or not, in Chapel Hill and Durham.
Oh, okay.
There really is if you go dig.
Mm-hmm.
And so I go and look at the firsthand accounts, and then I try to get some good stuff that way. But I was really lucky. At Virginia Tech, I had James I. Robertson Jr. as my Civil War professor, and I had Bud for about four classes when I was at Tech. And he's passed away now, but he was just a giant in the Civil War field. And he really got me interested in it when I was in college. My mother got me interested in history, but Bud's the one really got me interested in the war. And so that's where some of it comes. But you can never underestimate mentoring younger people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I've ever turned down a younger person who asked me for help, because I know what it was like to be that younger person. And I think I kind of follow in O.E. Pilson's footsteps a little bit, because he never shied away from taking us around. He was really an expert on the Hairston's, and he knew where all those big plantation houses were, and knew all about them. And he would take you around and show you. And he talked about black and white.
Mm-hmm.
There was never any just all the white people. He talked about both sides. And Mr. Pilson was great. So you need to share with younger people, because I'm 63 years old now, and I'm not going to live forever. And I think I need to make sure these younger people know what's going on.
Yeah. Do you have any advice for a young writer, author, or someone that wants to start that? What they should do if they wanted to take and put pen to paper?
Well, you need to read a lot. And I believe strongly that you go to the place where what you're writing about happened. If you're going to write about a Civil War battle, you go to that battlefield and you walk it. And, you need to go to the place it happened and soak it in a little bit. You need to find experts and locals who sometimes will know stuff that the big professor at the university doesn't know. Now, you have to make sure you document that and make sure that you get your facts right.
Yeah.
But you should never underestimate the man on the ground at a place, because like I went back to Icy Brown, without her keeping all those scrapbooks, there's lots and lots of things we wouldn't know about JEB Stuart and his family. And Carrie Sue, just to show you, she was descended from the Pettigos over there, and they lived next door to the Stewarts. So her grandmother would have known JEB Stuart.
Mm-hmm.
And I got some pretty good stories from that.
Yeah.
But, you need to think about outside the box a little bit. Don't just rely on printed stuff. Go to libraries, go and find out what you can find from firsthand sources.
Yeah.
And that's what, again, I've spent years and years in libraries researching this stuff.
That's awesome.
One of the stories about I love to tell is on 9/11, I was in the Library of Virginia researching, and which is a great facility. You can park underneath it for free. It's probably on free parking in Richmond you'll find is underneath that library. And I was in there researching that morning and had no idea what had happened. And came up for air about lunchtime, and I heard all the librarians talking about what had happened on 9/11. And so I didn't know until later in the day what had happened that day, because I had my nose in a book at the Library of Virginia and drove home. I remember driving home, listening to it all on the radio, which was, shock.
Yeah, and you talk about just document it and how they can do the history. I know that any of you all who reads the Enterprise on a regular basis, Beverly Woody She's up there and has her Patrick County perspective and things. And I tell you, she put some information out there too that's just astonishing, to have that recorded.
It's funny you mentioned Beverly. I've known Beverly for years. Every year I do programs at the Ararat Rotary Club for my scholarship I started in my parents' name. I give $500 a year to a Patrick County senior. And I make them write a history essay.
There you go.
So this year we're doing 3 programs at the Rotary Club. I'm doing one on the White Sulphur Springs Hotel down in Mount Airy, and Beverly's coming to talk about her Patrick Pioneers. We're going to have her come and talk about her articles, and then we're going to do another program about JEB Stuart, I think. But the Rotary Club supports me in doing that, and it's funny you bring her up because she's one of my speakers that's coming this year.
Good.
I think that's going to be in July.
Yeah,
that she's going to come and hopefully tell us about all this art. But her articles are outstanding. She spends a lot of work, a lot of time doing those. And I help her some when she asks me, but she's come up with stuff that I didn't even know.
Yeah. And that's good to be able to share that too, because being the tourism department here, and we're constantly looking at ways that we can promote the county. Of course, it's to bring more tourists in, to show them the beauty of the county, to show them the history of the county. And from everything that I've gathered in the short time that I've been here, history is one of the things that really has one of the I think some of the bigger impacts. Don't get me wrong, our natural beauty is absolutely awesome. Being at the foot of the Blue Ridge Mountains, having Firestone State Park, and of course the resort up in Meadows of Dam Primland, all of that is outstanding and awesome. You can enjoy that. But that being said, just the history of it, and it is so unique in that regards. And I'm very thankful for everyone that's put in the time and the effort into it, and very thankful for you, Tom, for all that you've done. And whether anybody else has ever said it, which I'm pretty sure they have, the books show it. You have that love, you have that desire to continue to do it. And before we get ready to go, we were talking before we got on camera that you've got another little book that you coming up that intrigued me. Don't have to give everything, but again, just entice some of the people, tell them something that, because it's good.
Every once in a while, I'll go off tangent and write something that's fiction. And one of the things that we're gonna probably bring out for Halloween this year is this Legend of Ahart Ridge, we call it, over there in near Willis Gap, and it's the story of a witch, and she learns how to be a witch from Lucifer himself. Supposedly, there's a rock over there they call the Devil's Chair. And he taught her how to be a witch. And remember now, I don't know that this is necessarily true, but she shapeshifts into this deer, this beautiful white deer, and she is going to end up being killed by one of the Ahart boys, and it morphs into other stories along the lines. But it's one of those things that's in the heritage books in Patrick County that I've heard my whole life. The Betty Scott, the Witch of Ahart Ridge, and so we're going to do a little book about that. I did one a couple of years ago called Raw-Headed Bloody Bones, which was an old Scottish boogeyman story that my buddy Jim Gwynn's Daddy Gray used to tell us when we were younger to get us to come home before dark. That if you didn't come home before dark, Raw-Headed Bloody Bones would get you. He was the Scottish boogeyman story. And so I turned that into a book. And, sometimes these folklore tales and things are fun. Sometimes you write a book just for fun. You don't necessarily have to be serious and all that kind of thing. But I think we'll bring that out probably before Halloween. And it's the Witch of Ahart Ridge.
That's wild. Yeah, I was telling Tom before we came on, I grew up on Johnson Street up here outside of, it's now incorporated into town, but we've had Indian burial plots up here. If you look at the county map, it says it's right at the bottom of Indian Grave Mountain or something they call it there. And I'm still learning, even though I'm a Patrick County my whole life. But I was telling Tom too, I said, my brother Jeff and my sister Greta and all of our cousins, we have had some unique upbringings when it comes to those ghost stories and stuff. And, you get them warm spots in the middle of the road. And there was always this barn that we'd have to go by when we walked up from DeHart Park. You see that barn coming up, you take off running because you could hear horses chattering, and there's wasn't nothing in there, never anything in there. And the story was that the guy used to hide moonshine in the barn, and somewhere he done it. But no, it was ghost.
Yeah. Well, the cold spot. You also run into people talking about
the warm
cold
spot. Oh yeah,
the cold spot.
Yeah,
too.
it's amazing.
But that's just one of those stories I'd heard all my life growing up. So I thought it'd be fun to play around with that a little bit.
Well, we've been doing, and we're getting ready to come to a close of this, but we've been doing some research here in the tourism office, and had Sue, one of the associates here, doing some research, and Grace and Noah, and we do all kind of things. And right now we're at almost 90 churches in Patrick County. You know, and what we're doing now is trying to verify if they are still, you know, active or inactive, regardless. So we see why we need a lot of them, especially if Lucifer visited over there. So, gotta have that. Gotta have
but
that.
It's the devil's chair. There's this rock that looks like you can sit down on.
Oh,
it,
yeah,
and that's always been the story. They called it the devil's chair.
Yeah.
But you know, Patrick County church history, the heritage books have lots of that in there.
That's
and,
true.
Mr. Pilson and the Historic Society documented some. But I will tell you one story at the end here. It's kind of funny. Jeb Stuart wrote his mother a letter about 1855, 6. He was way out west in Texas in the U.S. Cavalry, and he sent her $100. And he wanted her to match. Now, $100 in the 1850s is a lot of money.
Oh yeah.
And he wanted her to match that $100, and he wanted her to put an acre of land aside from her property to build what he called a comfortable log church in Ararat, because he had never seen a place that needed one so bad.
That's all right. Well, that's good. That's a good thing, though. And we're very thankful for all of them. And again, thank you, Tom, for coming in and spending this time with us and telling us some of the history and especially your background. And again, I'd encourage you all, if you are looking for, as you can tell by the books we have here, some are thicker than others. This is only a small sampling of what he does have. I tried to count them, and I know I counted over 66, and that was just off of your website. And I know it's probably more than that published.
Probably so.
So, but you can find anything. You can find a lot of information in it. So, but again, this is another segment of the people, the places, and the performance of Patrick, and this is one of the outstanding people here in Patrick County. Thank you, Tom. Continue the great work. And each time I talk to you, I learn a little bit more, especially about the high school and the people here in the county. So thank you very much for coming and sitting down with us. Yeah, all right. So thank you, Patrick County. Another episode. Catch us again. We're going to be doing more of this, and we're very thankful. And we'll take some suggestions and ideas on some of the people. So again, the people, the performance, and the places of Patrick. Thank you very much. Have a great evening. Take care.